Next, we have Mr. Praveen Nagpal. Mr. Praveen Nagpal is the CTO and co-founder of ChainThat, an insurance blockchain solution provider. He has over 18 years of experience in complex software design, development, and delivery, and is a Quora certified developer. Before this endeavor, he was an enterprise architect working in the London insurance market. Back then, enterprise DLTs did not exist, but with a strong sense of how it could liberate the insurance sector from outdated practices, and with an instinctive knowledge of how to architect it, he soon had a key backer and a strong team of developers. Mr. Praveen has been working with architecting blockchain and smart contract-based solutions for reinsurance across a magnitude of blockchain platforms and technologies. Please welcome Mr. Praveen Nagpal on stage.
Good morning, all. It's my first time in Chennai, so it's exciting for me. So good to see you all. I'll talk about insurance, primarily because that's what we provide solutions for based on blockchain platform. I know it can be a dry subject, insurance, but I'll try to make it exciting for you. Insurance is normally thought of as a necessary evil. People need to have it, but they don't enjoy buying insurance. So it's something that they have to do, but it's not their topmost priority typically. But I'll talk about insurance in the commercial world first, because that's where the biggest use cases for blockchain are coming from. So this is just a brief slide on ChainThat. So we are an insurance service provider, and we are building decentralized applications on blockchain platforms for the insurance world. That's what we are doing. We founded this company 3 years back. In fact, we just celebrated our 3-year anniversary yesterday. And so Bitcoin, one of the first applications on, in fact, the first application on blockchain is going to be 10 years by the end of this month. So the technology is evolving, and it's reaching a stage where we'll start seeing mainstream applications pretty soon now. I mean, a lot of people are at the stage of proof of concepts or pilots, but now is the time that we are going to see real stories of production applications by next year or so. So let's talk about insurance. I'll give you a brief context around insurance. So what is insurance? It's basically to provide cover for a risk, for an unfortunate loss that could happen. So you need to provide cover to your customer for it. So this practice of underwriting, so the underwriting is like writing a line on your paper. So that's how the term evolved. So this actually started in late 1600s, where it all used to happen in a coffee house. So Edward Lloyd's used to run it in a coffee house at that time. And there were some trade routes opening, especially in the context of silk, cotton, and tea. And people used to come over to this coffee house to discuss and work out contracts. So what they used to do, obviously there was all paper at that time, so they used to scribble notes and write out the terms of the risk at that time on paper. And underwriters at that time used to sign it up, okay, I will take up 10% of the risk, and there will be somebody who will take 20% of the risk, and there will be somebody who will be taking the other percentage of the risk. So that's how this whole subscription model worked. Because we are talking about big insurance risk here. I mean, it's not just about life or simple motor insurance. We're talking about insurance in the world of commercial area, where you might need to book or you might need to book insurance for a marine, a fleet of ship, might need to book airports, airplanes, nuclear power plants, energy, natural hazards like hurricanes or fire. So no one insurer can actually insure your risk, because they will go bankrupt as soon as the claims come and if there's a huge loss. So you will need, yeah. So you will need to actually distribute the risk across multiple insurers so that they can all participate in it. So as I talked about, the purpose of insurance is actually to protect you against potential losses. But over a period of time, the insurers have been occupied with their administration overheads, which is doing all the premium accounting, doing all the claim settlement. They haven't really been working on actually packaging insurance well for the customers. So the eventual value of the insurer would be when they focus on providing the protection on a risk, not while doing their admin work on handling premiums or handling claims, right? So in this context, I've used the images of a caveman just to show how this thing evolved, right? So essentially, it was all paperwork long time back and before the era of the internet. So if you look at insurance done before the last century or even during the last century, we've got people writing it down on paper contracts. Now came the internet. So internet solved the problem of the of information sharing, right? So with emails and with World Wide Web, they started automating their systems so that they can capture the information about the risk and also handle premiums and claims using their own systems. Now, this whole value chain of insurance is quite complicated. It's not so easy. So if I look at it, if somebody, let's say a company in let's say US wants to insure property, and they want to insure their own building, their corporate building, let's say. So they will go to a local broker, and then the local broker will actually talk to their primary insurer, because you have to divide the insurance risk where a certain part will be dealt by with the, for example, initial 10 million, if the loss is under 10 million, it will be covered by the primary insurer itself. But if it's beyond 10 million, let's say the loss is like 250 million. So what they do is, they've got a mechanism where they go to the wholesale broker. So the wholesale broker will probably be sitting in a retail market like London insurance market, Bermuda market, Zurich market, right? So they go to the wholesale broker, and the wholesale broker will go to that specialty market, right? So in this case, there will be multiple carriers or reinsurers, right? So there will be somebody who will need to insure the insurer, right? Because if, again, I'm talking about big risks here, which the primary insurer cannot meet on their own, right? So in that context, what will happen is these carriers are representation. It may not be 3 carriers. I've just shown 3 carriers here, but it could be 10, 11, however many are required on the risk contract. So the broker compiles the contract for everybody, and then they have individual contracts with each of these carriers, right? So as you can see, it's a quite, if you look at the business process, it's quite peer-to-peer, people going from one to another, but they have got their own disparate system. Now, one way, I'll talk about how this works. So internet resolved the issue of communication, right? So you now have an internet of information where you have a copy of the contract which is shared across each of the carriers. But the things above communication, things like processing the information, what is the perception which I have of this information compared to, let's say, another carrier, and the actions that I'm doing are still individual, are still to the entities who hold this information, right? So they are not actually shared information in that sense. It's only the layer, bottom layer, which is all about communication. It's like throwing the information over the wall, right? So you will build systems using messaging or using services to communicate, but beyond that, I don't know what you have, right? You will control that information. Again, you come back to me through some integration, but I don't have visibility. If I am a counterparty, I don't have visibility of what's happening with that information which was shared, right? So what problems we encounter due to this is that there are multiple handoffs. So the expense of writing a contract for the customer is high because there are so many participants involved, and the broker will always charge a brokerage according to the complexity of the contract, right? So there are high back office costs because then each of these parties are maintaining their own database to store the information. The cost of coordination and reconciliation is quite a lot. So as you can see, the expense is quite high to deal with this kind of a setup. which leads to long delays, inevitable long delays. You'll have cash flow issues because unless you have a visibility, it's very difficult to maintain good liquidity for the insurers unless they know how much they need to settle, right? And obviously the data has no audit, it's got poor quality because each is maintaining their own store, and it is corruptible because each of their systems are prone to hacking, and there's no an underlying security layer around it, right? So let's talk about how distributed ledger compared to a central system. Now, the process flow that I showed for multiple participants in insurance value chain could be solved, and it's been solved to some extent by a centralized system, right? So in London insurance market, there's a bureau, there's a London bureau which runs this, and all insurers and brokers use that system to share information. So rather than sending it from one to another. But is that the solution? Because then you are solely trusting that central service provider, right? Because essentially what is happening is that effectively you have placed all your trust on your central system owner, and clients are putting data of their own. So there's no clear data ownership here. The data is actually being managed by your central system owner, right? Whereas in a decentralized and a distributed ledger network, you remove the system owner, the central system owner. It's like going back to the way you would do your business, right? It's all peer. The only facility that central system owner was actually providing you a system and the maintenance on it for sharing the information. But now you've removed the intermediary. So that's the middleman in between, right? That's the one that this technology is actually targeting to remove. So this whole disintermediation is the step towards how the business was supposed to be there. So in this new world, we are actually creating business or software for the market rather than for the corporates. So this is a big change, right? So in market, there is no CEO or CIO or anything. You don't have a command control structure. It's like a bazaar, right? So you come here, you've got shops which provide services to the customer. So that is the whole idea of having a software for the market. Whereas we've been doing software for the corporates, for the aggregators. So essentially you've got the Ubers and the Amazons and the Airbnbs who've been kind of aggregating all the information. But that would mean you've been laying full trust on these entities to do that. So they're not really sharing information, they're kind of piling up the information that you're providing to them, right? So in this context, if I change that whole layout, that whole caveman layout of how the insurance value chain will work. Now, in this case, it's all peer-to-peer. Now, what we've got is, obviously, it will need to be secured, it will need to be shared on what you need to know basis, right? So that is why there is a special good place for private enterprise blockchains, wherein you don't want this data to be public, to be available to all, but you want to share it only on a need-to-know basis with the parties who you are dealing with, right? You don't want to actually, if you are a carrier, you don't want to share this same information with another carrier who could be your competitor, right? But in another contract, they could be a collaborator, right? So in that context, you might want to share information with them. So it's on a need-to-know basis. That is the big thing, rather than sharing everything or sharing. So public blockchains have got good use cases of their own, right? But in case of enterprise, especially in insurance, privacy and scalability are two important criteria that we are trying to handle. And that's where there's good space for private permission blockchains. Right? So if I go back to my earlier view of how the action, perception, and processing were working, in this case, there's shared communication, there's shared processing, and you've got a shared ledger of facts. Now, facts are something that you would want to share with your counterparty. But still, actions are your own. Whatever you want to do, you can still do on your own. But now you've got a more transparent world of what you want to share. You have an ability that you could share. Right? Now, again, going back to that old discussion about, okay, what is the difference between public and private blockchains? Now, Bitcoin, Ethereum, classic examples of public blockchains wherein anyone can join. You are pseudonymous. You don't need to divulge your identities, and anybody can join and leave at their own will. And essentially, there is no single party maintaining consensus. It's all done through a mechanism. There are different consensus protocols like proof of work or proof of stake. In case of proof of work, miners do that hard work of trying to reach consensus for you, right? And then typically you would have a currency like Bitcoin or like Ether in case of Ethereum for actually funding the work that is happening, right? So you would need that fuel to be able to operate your network. The area where we are working is in mainly the private blockchain area, where you have known parties, right? Broker A is transacting with carrier A and they know each other pretty well because they do business with them, right? But you still need that operational efficiency of being able to share that data with a party on a same network, and you would need validation or consensus happening between those parties who are involved in that transaction. So if broker A sends it to carrier A and sends it to carrier B, you should be able to validate the signatures of those parties involved in the transaction without a third party being aware of the fact that there is a transaction happening between these two. Okay? So the consensus is actually made to build those business needs. It's the mechanism that's in there is suited to those business needs in there. And there's a closed governance model. So there would be somebody who will play the operation or the role of a network operator. So there's a bit of what you could call a centralization in this concept, which is completely not there in a typical public blockchain. But if the parties agree that, okay, there is a regulatory body in there who will be able to oversee. Look, in case of tell me any game wherein there is no referee or umpire involved. I can think of only golf, probably. I can't see, or I don't know if there is one where there's no need for an umpire or a regulator, because you need to have somebody who actually sees that people are playing according to the rules. So there is fair play happening around, right? Yes, the rules are set in the smart contract. So in a sense, the contract in this case, in case of private blockchain, what happens is that what you get is a concept of a notary, right? Somebody who can attest that this transaction is unique in that context. The rules obviously will need to be followed by all the nodes engaged in the transaction. So they will need to validate that, okay, the rules need to be shared, as I showed you in the previous slide. So they are all following the same set of rules here. And they can independently verify that the rules are the same. So in that context, we have found over the past 20 odd months, we've been working in the London insurance market. We've done prototypes for 2 other insurers in the European market, where they actually want to work on this kind of a network because of the fact that it will reduce their operational cost, right? That's the low-hanging fruit, in a sense, that they will get out of this. Because right now they've got too many either point-to-point integrations happening, which is not part of the same network, or they have relied on a central network which is inefficient. So in that context, what we have seen is the expense ratio is a key term or a figure that we need to control in insurance world. It basically means your administration cost over what you are earning in terms of premium. So they have been quite stubborn over the past few years. So the expense ratios have oscillated between 28 to 40% in the insurance market, especially if you look at Lloyd's and the London insurance market. So the idea is actually with DLT platforms, that's the first gain that we are looking at, to reduce it to something around 10 to 25%. Wherein we could reduce the admin cost of each having to maintain their data and also secure the network through cryptography that comes within the DLT platforms. So eventually the benefits that we see are that we've got a single version of truth, which everybody can see. There is good data quality because of that, and because of the fact that they are now sharing the processing using the concept of smart contracts, and they're also sharing the same set of validation rules, it obviously helps in reducing their cost and getting a good audit trail out of these transactions, because these are now going to be immutable transactions. No one party can actually tamper it without the others obviously being aware of that, somebody trying to do that act, right? So this is the whole area where we see vast potential. We've just completed a prototype with Lloyd's, which was successful. They want to go to a next stage now of running a pilot and going to production next year. And we're also working, as I said, with other markets like Bermuda market in this space. So if you have to name one technology which is a foundational technology, which is going to impact in a high manner the way businesses are done, this is the one. So blockchain is the one. I know there are other technologies like AI, machine learning, IoT. They will all have integrations with blockchain, but this is the kind of the foundational technology that we will start seeing, which will impact both socio and economic ways of how we do work. Thank you so much. I'm available for the next 3 hours or so. So if you have any questions, yeah, just get in touch with me. So this is my contact details. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the highly informative talk. I would like to repeat the announcement for people who came late. The Technobytes workshop has been postponed and will start after this event ends.